India's Minister of External Affairs, Dr. S Jaishankar, is confident that India will get a permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council. Now, India has been calling for reforms at the UNSC for a while and has even cut down its funding to the UN as a sign of discontentment. Now, Dr. S Jaishankar has said that India will definitely secure a permanent seat at the UNSC because there is a feeling in the world that India should get it. Why should India get a permanent seat at the UNSC? I've talked about this at length in this video here. If you are interested in watching that video, please click the link in the description. But to give you a brief answer, India is the largest democracy in the world with a 1.4 billion population that is only going to increase in the coming years. Now, this 1.4 billion population represents roughly 17% of the total global population. And if India is not a part of the UNSC, then a major part of the global population is not going to be represented. Dr. S Jaishankar also mentioned that at the time of the formation of the UNSC 80 years ago, there were 50 independent countries in the world, and today there are 193 countries that are part of the UN. A lot has changed in these 80 years. The world has completely transformed in the last 8 decades, and at this time we are also witnessing a shift in the global order. So it only makes sense to make some amendments to the UNSC so that the current global issues that we are facing could be addressed in a better way, so that we can have a better approach to those issues. It is also important to note that the UN has not been able to provide workable solutions to solve the two major wars that we are currently going through. The first war is the Russia-Ukraine war that has been going on for over 2 years, and there has not been a specific solution inside. The second war that we are talking about is the Israel and Palestine war that started in October 2023 and is ongoing ever since. Now, there has not been a proper consensus that we have been able to come up to in order to solve both the wars. So reforms at the UNSC would enable us to approach these two wars in a better way so that we can take specific steps to safeguard international peace and security. No reforms at the UNSC can be made without the approval of all the permanent members. So even if one member disagrees to a particular decision, the consensus fails. Now, these 5 permanent members, namely the US, the UK, China, France and Russia, they are responsible for taking all the decisions, all the major decisions regarding anything that is happening in the world at the UNSC. And while they are taking all these decisions, it does not mean that the decisions that they are taken with an effective approach, as there may be many global issues that these countries may not have proper understanding of. They may lack some understanding of many of these issues. For example, it is extremely difficult for any of these 5 permanent members to take a decision about something that is happening in Africa or Latin America. Not because they lack an understanding of decision making, but because they lack the cultural and regional associations. Now, Dr. Jaishankar said that these 5 nations, they have kept their control, and it is strange that we have to ask them to give us their consent for a change. A few agree, a few others put forward their position with honesty, while others do something from behind. But this has been going on at the UNSC for the last 80 years. And it is not just India that is calling for these reforms, but the entire world is calling for reforms at the UNSC, including the African Union as well as the G4 nations. Now, the G4 nations are a group of 4 nations, namely India, Germany, Japan and Brazil. And these nations, they support each other's bids to become permanent members at the UNSC. India even submitted a proposal on behalf of these G4 nations regarding reforms at the UNSC. As per the proposal, new permanent members to the UNSC should be selected democratically by the General Assembly. Not only that, but there should be about 25 to 26 members at the UNSC. Currently, the UNSC has 15 members. 5 are permanent members and 10 members are non-permanent members that are appointed for a 2-year term. This increase from 15 to 25 or 26 members would include 6 new permanent members to the UNSC and about 4 or 5 new non-permanent members. As per this proposal, the UN currently underrepresents many of the member nations, which is detrimental to the legitimacy and effectiveness of the UN Council. So this proposal that has been made by the G4 nations is made on the understanding that the UN, the current structure of the UN, is made in such a way that it does not represent the issues of many of the member nations. and that there needs to certainly be a reform so that issues pertaining to these regions or these nation states, they can be addressed in a better light so that these member nations, they do not lose their trust in UN. And if the UN does not make any amendments or reforms to its current structure, then member states, they would lose their confidence in the ability of the UN to handle situations in a better way. Now, this proposal was met with an opposition from Uniting for Consensus at the UN. Now, the UFC, or Uniting for Consensus, is a group of countries that include Argentina, Colombia, Canada, Turkey, Pakistan, Costa Rica, Republic of Korea, San Marino, and Spain. And it also includes 2 members that are observing members, including the permanent member of the UN, China, and Indonesia. The UFC has proposed a similar model in terms of the number of member nations at the UNSC, which is 26 member nations, but it also states that all of the new members of the UNSC should be non-permanent members. There should not be any increase in the permanent members at the UN. Now, one of the major reasons for the UFC's stance is that it includes Pakistan and China, and these 2 countries, they do not want India to become a permanent member. So it only makes sense for them to come up with this proposal. Now, the UFC's model also states that the UNSC should add 9 new long-term seats with an immediate possibility of re-election. However, India has criticized and slammed this proposal that has been sent by the UFC and stated that it goes against the idea that has been espoused by the majority members at the UN, namely that of the expansion in the non-permanent and permanent seats at the UNSC. Now, this was stated by India's permanent representative to the UN ambassador, Ruchira Kamboj. And it only makes sense because when you think about it, if there is no change to the permanent members, to the list of the permanent members at the UNSC, then any reform or amendment that takes place would make little to no sense for the member states that want a change at the UNSC's permanent table. And the second point here is that if there is no change in the permanent seats at the UNSC, then still there would be a lack of understanding on the part of the permanent members regarding issues of other members of the UN. So they would still not discuss those issues, or they would still take decisions that are not as effective as they should be. So it won't make any sense if there is no change that is made regarding the permanent seats at the UN, because those relevant issues to other member nations, they would still not be discussed, or they would still not be taken care of properly. Now, Miss Ruchira Kamboj, she even expressed a requirement of a UN 2.0, a United Nations 2.0, and she said that the 21st century world, it definitely and desperately needs a UN 2.0 that is credible, representative, reflecting the needs and aspirations of the member states, and capable of maintaining peace and security. And we have even mentioned this earlier in the video several times, that the current model of the UNSC, it is unable to take better decisions. It is unable to take better approach to solve or to come to a consensus to the 2 of the major crises that we are witnessing right now. And that is why some reforms at the UNSC would provide us with better approach to handling these situations. And this emphasis of India becoming a permanent member of the UNSC, it does not only stem from the fact that India is the most populated country in the world, or that it is the 5th largest economy in the world, but it also stems from the fact that India has now become the voice of the global south. Now, the global south are the developing countries of the world, from the Latin American region, the African region, parts of Asia, and even the Caribbean islands. And India's representation at the UNSC would mean a representation of the developing world. Now, the African Union, which is a group of 54 countries from Africa, it also became, the whole group as a part, became a member of the G20 during the time of India's presidency. And even the African Union has desired for a reform at the permanent and non-permanent seats at the UNSC. UNSC could truly represent the issues of the global world in the 21st century if it makes these amendments, if it is able to have a representation of the developing world. And while India believes that all the members, all the permanent members of the UNSC, except for China, they support India's bid to become a permanent member at the UNSC, it could also be true that many of these members, they're aware that China would not let that happen. China does not want India to become a permanent member. This is why they could be pretending to be on India's side, because they know that India would face an obstacle from China. Now, another issue here is that once the UNSC, it becomes open to these reforms, it means that it would be open to reforms in the future as well. And that would challenge the authority as well as the hierarchical categorization of these member nations, which is why many of these permanent members, they would not want India to become a permanent member, or they would not want any reforms to take place at the UNSC. So with all of that being said, what do you think about India's future at the UNSC? Do you think that India will become a permanent member? Do you think that the UNSC would be open to these reforms, the proposal that has been put forward by the G4 nations? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video valuable, please share this video with your friends and family. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you do not miss our new videos. Thank you for watching this video and have a good day.